I've been thinking about harmony too much in terms of uniformity, because thinking about, particularly, I've got a very, I think, conventional idea of Confucian ideas and Platonic ideas of harmony as tending towards being authoritarian. So everybody has to live in line with harmony, which reduces choice and freedom and so on. And then I was just reading a couple of papers this morning about Confucianism and human rights and harmony, actually making the opposite point. That Confucianism actually requires a recognition of diversity.
Beautiful.
And so the overall harmony comes when people with diverse backgrounds work together rather than submit to the same way of being. And the analogy that really picked up on me was food. Because food works best when it's got complicated mixtures of spices and flavours.
So true.
You see, otherwise it's just bland.
Yeah.
So, and that really hit me, that therefore food requires diversity.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, and that metaphor finally made sense to me in terms of harmony, requiring diversity.
It's true. I mean, in my octave studies of geometry and the mathematics of the octave, I came to see that harmony is not an exclusive, divisive tool. Even dissonance is a part of harmony.
Yeah.
Even though it doesn't categorically conform to the definition of harmony, it's those tensions, those moments of tensions that when you get to those incredibly mathematically perfect aspects, or geometric points, or nodes, of where the harmony becomes peak.
Yeah.
And then there's kind of like multiple dimensions of harmony, like as you increase in frequency, the complexity of the harmony increases, which is also a beautiful way to see that as you each reach each stage of geometrical harmony, you pass through new levels of dissonance that then lead you to a more evolved level of harmony, which lead you to dissonance, which, so it's really cool how harmony is an inclusive and diverse experience.
Yeah, so I mean, what I've been thinking is that if all things weren't connected by harmony in terms of fundamental physics, the world would fall to bits in a second. So
true.
well, less in a second. So some people would think about harmony as really being in terms of classical physics. Everything's working in an order.
Yeah.
You can project that order into the future. It's all mathematically regulated. But people also talk about quantum mechanics in terms of order.
Yeah.
And I completely undercut classical physics. But there still has to be an order, even in chaos theory, with fractals. There has to be, a harmony. That's why we find Mandelbrot sets so beautiful.
I love them.
It's true. But so then chaos theory is no longer then the antithesis of classical physics or the more conventional view of the world. There has to be a harmony.
And speaking of Mandelbrot and fractal realities, it was fractals that helped me understand how our perception of chaos is just that we've zoomed in too close to see the overall order.
Yeah.
And what's cool about fractals is the closer you zoom in, the more you realize it's microscopic, reflecting microscopic, reflecting macroscopic.
Yeah.
And that level of that, I've always felt that chaos is just the inability to zoom out far enough to see the big picture.
What I like about chaos theory is the idea of the strange attractor.
Oh, wow.
So that any one of us can be a strange attractor and commit an act like throwing a stone into a pond.
Yes.
That then changes the order and the harmony and the unfolding of the order for everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the moment you do something like, the moment you organise anything, like organising a concert for your music in the cafe, you become a strange attractor and sends the ripples out. And most of us are doing it. Most of us act as strange attractors in some sort of way in our lives, because the moment we have relationships, we necessarily change other people's lives.
And we're very usually subconscious of the full ramifications of how we are these strange attractors.
And you can actually interact with a stranger in the street and be completely unaware of the impact you have on them.
Yeah.
But you might change that person's life. Maybe just like a small act of kindness, like helping somebody across a road that you don't think any more about.
Yeah.
Might be a profound event for somebody else.
It's like the butterfly theory of the butterfly's wings. And it's such a and that's what I was really been questioning. How connected do we feel with the micro and the macro? Because I think it also relates to the soul in the sense of like, if we believe that our little micro actions have macro effects, it's also like, do we feel that does the essence we act from, does that exist? Is it something that is it transcendent of time? Because even time is a kind of a construct and a limit within the boundaries of these effects. Yeah. And so the soul is the concept that the only thing that we as humans have access to beyond time, that transcends time. So I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, so in what sense are we individuals? You know, or are we floating on the great sea of consciousness? You know, or I was talking to somebody the other day, or about somebody who is going through a process of breaking down their ego, of initiation, release their ego, and build it up again. But how do we actually know that we've got an ego?
Yeah.
You know, the ego is then a name that we put on something that we experience.
Exactly.
But you know,
it's
just a word. We might as well call it, you know, Dave or Mike, Juan, you know, and then create something out of it.
The fascinating thing about the ego, as I understand it, is that it is the socially conditioned, fragmented sense of self, and from the Buddhist perspective, the root of all problems and suffering.
Yeah.
Because that's the immediate sense that we are separate from each other and from life. We've created the ego that has the me and I and the my wants and then my quest in relationship to the other to attain what I need. Yeah. And that whole philosophy is it's generating so many of these strange attractor ripples that how do we harmonize the chaos of all these strange attractor ripples that are causing interference patterns? Because that's also the beautiful thing of physics, is to observe. Maybe harmony is an understanding of the physics of how our strange attractor ripples are affecting the pond of our collective.
Yeah, and then complexity happens when all the ripples interact.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I had a nice experience the other day when I was in Devon, and it was a sunny day, and I was watching the river. I was sitting by the River Dart, which runs through Dartington, and stimulated by work that I've read to do with the reflection of light on water, I started watching ripples on the water, and the ripples reflected the light, and they were dependent on two things. One was the breeze, which was spasmodic, and the other was clouds, which kept on moving across the sun.
What is spasmodic?
Well, occasional.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah.
And so you get, the sun would come out and the breeze would blow.
Oh.
And these beautiful ripples flying across the water, and then they'd gradually dissipate. Because as the breeze died down, the water would calm down.
Yeah.
And become flatter, and then the ripples would spin. Maybe a cloud would move over the sun again, and then go completely. But these patterns were just exquisite, and I never used to notice them. I just used to think, but there's a reflection of the light on water. You can see these great paintings, like Turner's paintings of light reflects on water. Does the light reflects on water? And then you think, hang on, there's the light is broken up into these intricate patterns, and sometimes as well the light will then reflect on cliffs. Say there's a rocky face near the water, the light goes up and reflects on the cliffs as well, so you get these little multiple patterns.
It's miraculous.
And what I'm thinking of is some work that somebody I know did on glitter paths. And so you get like the sun, typically, or maybe a full moon, when it's just above a large body of water, will send a reflection down the water, which will glitter because of ripples in the water. And as you stand watching it, it always points towards the sun.
Yes.
It has to lead towards the sun. It can't lead over there or there.
Yeah.
And so it becomes almost a path that you could walk over the water to the sun.
I love it. The perceptual Christ.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we do travel with perception. And, you're talking my soul, because that's what led me into video art. I was at the gala here in Deya, and I had my cheap little Samsung, and all of a sudden I see the sun reflecting off of the water, just doing all of its little bouncing around around all the rocks. And I look at it through my video camera, and I zoom into it just with my hand. It's getting as close to the water without wetting it, and then you just see basically one little luminous dot going, doing its little, almost atomic squiggle. And I started to zoom out, and all of a sudden there was a light became harmonically divided into, then the one little dot became two, and then we'll turn back to one, and become two, turn back to one, and then you come out a little further, then it goes into three, it goes back to one and two, and then as you start pulling out, you're doing the harmonic sequence.
Yeah.
And by the time you're standing far enough away, the one becomes infinite. And that to me was that I called it quantum water, because that was the closest thing that I could experience to like the mystical and mathematical, numerological and harmonic experience of how the one becomes infinite, and the interconnection between all of that. It was a mystical experience, and that's what started my video art a career in a sense, because just that one revelation just spawned. Then I had another friend who was working with Final Cut Pro, and then I learned how to put the effects filters on it, and to even go into mandala and more apply the geometric. So I think there's something very special about being able to see how spirit expresses itself through nature, and how meditation as a way to see deeper into just what you said as earlier, just before it's just ripples on the water. But as we get more aware, I think, and tuned in, we start to see much more.
Yeah. Well, the question is, what is the water? We don't want to, the watery planet. Well, I recently got tied on by the notion of the hyper-object. So it was like harmony is diversity in food. It suddenly was one of those ideas that made sense to me. So a hyper-object is just an object which is huge. Okay, so and the example I was reading about is that water is a hyper-object.
Okay.
So it's everywhere. It's we're partly made of it.
Yeah.
It's in the air around us.
Yeah.
It's in the sea just down the road.
Yeah.
It's in the clouds, and it's constantly moving. So it'll come out of the tap, you know, and then we'll drink it, it'll go into our bodies, and it moves out again. You can break it up into tiny amounts. You can get a drop of water, or you can get the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
You know, and then it evaporates. It comes out. So it's this huge thing in our world that's constantly moving. We can't live without it. However much we try and create artificial environments, we'll never live without water.
Yeah.
And where there's shortages, it creates problems, like in Syria.
Death, disease, and violence.
Yeah. You know, look at, you know, you get a bit of, you know, drought in Syria. People go to live in the cities. You get this sort of political upheaval, migration.
Yeah.
You know, it sets on so many things, and that's water. So it's water. You could look at water as the thing which is running our world, and it's a hyper object, and maybe it doesn't have a central intelligence. It doesn't think, oh, I'm going to do this next, but it's still the operative thing that actually is keeping us going. Like it's under the ground, it's in the sky. You know.
I love the film Dune. Because the its emphasis on how you carry your water, you know, and just feeling like, well, what are we doing? Defecating in it, you know, like obviously civilization has created the luxury to create a transport medium, to use it as a transport medium. Is that the best use of this sacred source of life, as close to God as we can get, you know, like in the sense of what sustains our life? I think our relationship to water is amazing, and the whole kind of you know, pipeline, Dakota Access Pipeline controversy in the United States, where the indigenous waters and the water politics. I mean, it's a very critical issue. Is how do we relate to water, and what are the rights, and then how does society organize itself around this in a non, you know, what aristocratic way and democratic way towards access to the causes of life, and
well, this whole valley where we are, the Sonia Valley, has this evolved this wonderful system of water rights, and you know,
so true.
The channels that go through
distribution,
so many parts of the valley, and then you know, everybody has their ration of water.
An infrastructure of equal distribution.
Yeah.
So important.
It is. It's like we walk as people, we walk the roads, but there's another whole arterial fabric going through the valley that now is partly replaced by pipes and taps, but actually not, as far as irrigating all the orange groves and olive groves.
It's true, because like 100 years ago, this was relatively self-reliant. So the resilient sustainability infrastructure is still here. Modernity has kind of introduced the modern ways of distribution, which could and could not be an enhancement, depending on, you know, the quality of life that we get from it. But I love what we just talked about as the Soya Valley as a model of a just distribution mechanism for the rights of life. You know.
Yeah. And everybody has a right to it. It's very democratically managed.
The problem that I see with the aristocratic elitist perspective is that it doesn't seek to find the treasure in every person. Like there's this very almost fascist belief that poor people have no value. You know, and that because of scarcity of resources, we're heading into, you know, the depopulation movement and it's really scary to me, because if there's a soul, if there is no death, then we really can't kill each other, and so why try to kill each other, and why try to? There's just so many alternatives. Maybe harmony is a way to manage complexity in a way that we still can find the treasure in every person. You know, without having to have these ideologies that it's scarcity based and certain people just gotta go.
Yeah. Well, if everybody has their their value,
Mm-hmm.
and harmony depends on everybody having their rights, and those rights are partly to do with relationships and their right to participate in relationships. Then then everybody has a right to an equal existence. I mean, this is why I think, in terms of what you're saying, this is why every time there's a Syrian refugee who gets becomes a doctor, or an ex-Vietnamese boat person, or something who becomes a mathematical genius, these individual stories are used to encapsulate the idea that actually migrants and people have to flee their homeland are in fact incredibly can be functionally useful to our society. So an economic function is found for them, but actually they have an absolute right, because the power of rich people and aristocrats and elites doesn't exist without the poor people who are going to buy their goods. For example,
Interdependence, the recognition. Water as a model for the recognition of interdependence. Because without the distribution, that's the problem with all these corporations not wanting to pay tax and acting like cancerous tumors on the planet with selfish greed, because they don't want to give back to the society that they profit from the infrastructure that the collective has created. And so this whole freedom from taxation and not feeling responsible, of course nobody wants to have their hard work extracted from them for a cause they don't believe in. But I mean, I think if we reprioritize, then it can be at least basic equal survival rights could be a worthy cause. I mean, it's like, I don't know. How do we deal with these ideologies? I've always felt that the clash of ideologies is this is the age of the clash of ideologies, and we're trying to harmony as like which ideologies just no longer serve us. What do we need to let go of? Because as you go through an octave, there's moments of polarity shift in mathematics. Like the cycle starts to spin and change, and maybe these nodes where there's a shift in direction are like realization points where this no longer serves us. Maybe we can liberate ourselves from these concepts, these ideologies, these policies that no longer truly serve us. And I mean, is there a global body that's trying to reconcile these differences in ideologies on a serious level? I mean, we know we have institutions like the United Nations, the International Criminal Court, and how does that affect nationalism? I mean, harmony is going to be a beautiful challenge.
Because right now we have, these political movements that self-consciously have taken on the term disruptors. So it somehow seems to be good to disrupt. Trump is a disruptor. His his former key theorist, Steve Bannon, the great disruptor. The
distraction is
Salvini, Le Pen, they all see themselves as disrupting something that, in their view, has become oppressive, collectivist, complacent, or at least that's what they say.
It's the ego fighting the spirit, in the sense of the self is fighting the collective.
And so I think you're right. So if we look at Trump as the great disruptor, he's very random in the way he disrupts. So he'll denounce some other politician one day, and the next day they'll say, "Oh, they're a great guy, my good friend."
They're calling the interference patterns, interference ripples in the collective wave. This is. Well then, I mean, how does society kind of deal with that? Like what systems of ethics and laws and legislation do we put in place to see how the ego sabotages and addresses disruption? whether it be healthy or unhealthy, because at some point, sometimes disruption is healthy if the pattern is not functioning.
I actually think that parliamentary democracy was established for this very reason. And so if we look at disruption, the disruptions happening at the moment, I mean, from some ways of looking at harmony, that's part of the process, isn't it? So you go through sort of up waves of peace and then maybe down waves of crisis. You had a crisis and then floating up wave, or in China, oscillate between the yin and the yang. And that idea of going through a cyclical path would have been very well known to every educated European person until recently, because it was fundamental to any classical education, so they would have been aware of it.
Okay.
And so I think that in the 19th century, right, people became very concerned about revolution after the French Revolution, and then Marxism built up in the 19th century with the idea that could be overthrown the existing order. And social democracy explicitly, I think, developed as a way of managing those processes. So you assume that everybody is a bit egotistical, so you try and restrain the mob. What you might see as the mob.
The mass,
and so you get them to, then you give them democratic rights, but you filter that through people who are representatives. And those representatives then reach a kind of consensus. And I actually think it's a really good model. That's the model that's being sort of challenged at the moment, isn't it? By populism, where you think everybody has a right to have their political view directly expressed through a leader.
I find that
politicians and judges and so on may get in the way of that direct expression of the will.
I mean, to me, it fundamentally boils down to, can anybody truly be represented? This is the fundamental flaw that I see in democracy, and I think one of the reasons Plato and Socrates didn't really believe in it, because they saw it as the way that the most unqualified people rise to positions of power and authority. I was just having this conversation with my brother's wife, who's politically involved, and if I have a representative, then I have to be shadowing them all the time. Because if the moment they do something that's not in alignment with my values, there's been a split, and then I'm no longer being represented, and then therefore, how can justice proceed? So I think this is the fundamental flaw in the problem of representation and that type of. I think consensus. The ideal for me would be, how do we attain unanimous agreement?
So, what do you think of the idea of citizens' assemblies?
I think that's a process to explore how to attain a unanimous agreement, because I would say if anybody disagrees, their logical argument should be well enough presented in a way that could sway the entire majority. But if it's then the validity of, if it's the ego just saying, no, I don't want to, like a spoiled brat, because then I won't be able to do this. What is the responsibility the individual has to the collective, and then it's being like, okay, well, no, I mean, we all have a responsibility, and this is where universal basic income could really help. For example, if everybody was given universal basic income with the agreement of having to participate on some level to maintain, and then profit can still occur above survival, because we're all artists, we're all creative, we're all capitalists in a sense, we all want to give products and services, and that's fine, let's do that. But I don't think it should be at the expense of the survival basics, which most people could agree, unless you're completely have very little heart and spirituality, that everybody deserves universal basic rights of health and wellness and just decent relationship quality. But we've internalized so much abuse, and then media helps us, feeds the abuse, feeds the violence. It's a challenge. I don't know.
everybody has the right to drink back to water. I think that one of the great abuses that happened in Britain when state assets were sold off, trying to sell some of them off, but where the water was privatised.
Yeah.
And that seems to me to be fundamentally an attack on basic rights, that some people should make a profit out of supplying water to other people.
Yeah.
That, I think, is kind of immoral.
It's criminal.
In its very
I agree.
essence.
Yeah.
Yeah, because everybody should have the right to eat, breathe. Nobody has yet suggested privatising air, but they would do.
They would definitely,
if they
could.
Yeah.
Spain tried to privatize the sun. They finally, I
Really?
think, with the solar panel tax.
Oh yeah.
The energy mafias. You
Yeah.
know, so I think that's crumbling. I mean, the thing is, change is coming. All that is unjust and non-spiritual is going to crumble in time. The harmony as crisis management. You know,
Yeah.
it's like we're all these fake ideologies and heartless, soulless policies are eventually going to create more suffering, more violence, more tyranny, more drama. Eventually, certain groups of people. This is why I hate violence as a solution. I hate that we see violence as a solution, because then it's like, okay, well, if you don't have the guns, how do you make the change? Because if the people with power are entrenched with guns, there's no possibility for change. What kind of a world is that?
I know. Well, what kind of mentality makes anybody think that they have the right to just snuff somebody out who disagrees with them?
Yeah.
If you disagree with me, I'll kill you. You know, what sort of weird mentality leads somebody to that?
That's mental illness.
idea?
That's sociopathology.
It is.
That's like be locked up in an asylum.
Yeah, but I know.
Sociopath, and unfortunately, capitalism breeds a certain level of this. So this is where I think we have to kind of create a compassionate, collective, cooperative capitalism where profit's fine.
Yeah.
People can profit. Let's just bring the profit margin above survival. Let's not entrench survival with profit. You know, let's get everybody above survival. You know, I think Chief Seattle told Washington, the great chief in Washington, when he wanted to buy the land, when they wanted to buy the land, it's like, you know, how can you sell the earth that my ancestors' ashes are speaking to me? How can you buy the water where my ancestors are murmuring? You know, this beautiful, the most spiritual thing I've ever read, and basically challenging the government to question its capacity to commodify spirit and creation and nature. So
I don't know, how can somebody own this mountain?
Yeah.
You know, it's a kind of, again, to think that you can is almost a kind of mental illness. I mean, we get used to the idea that we own our immediate dwellings.
Yeah.
That's so that's okay. It's on a small scale. My
security.
House,
It's the security.
Yeah. But you know, we could equally well live in co-ops and you know, not own our individual spaces. Live in our individual spaces, but not own them individually.
This comes to the problem of identity.
Yeah.
Because the moment ownership is correlated with identity.
Yeah.
Because maybe on a certain level, if we start to correlate ownership with identity, our sense of identity, our sense of self, is enhanced by the things that we own. And in astrology, the I am and the I have are like the first two stages.
Yeah.
Aries, Taurus, energy. You know, it's like those are the first two stages of the immature ego in its developmental cycle into the transpersonal self. So obviously we see what stage of development we're still at.
Yeah.
When our socio-economic system is only, you know, 2/12 of the way into its development. So yeah, the I have and if we didn't have to identify it, well, Hinduism says I am what I perceive.
Yeah.
I love that, because then you can look at the mountain and you can say I am that too. I have it.
Yeah.
I don't need to own it because I am a part of that. So I think it goes back to the ego and the sense of separation and the need to assert the ego to feel that it has a sense of power and strength as a result of feeling powerless from the sense of separation.
Yeah.
I mean, right now Chiron is moving through Pisces and Aries over the last, 20 years. In sidereal and tropical, it's different, but it's basically the wound of the connection to source and the wound to masculinity, and how to heal masculinity and how to heal our wound to our connection to the source in the sense of how we identify. So I love how the archetypes are kind of, we're living in the times,
Yeah.
how the astrology maps are a sign of the times, of our collective issues. These transits are amazing. So one of the things I think, what is your understanding of the history? When did it really start to emerge? Because I think I learned about 300 BC, Hipparchus was developing. He was one of the first Westerners to calculate the precession of the equinoxes.
Yeah.
And do you know anything prior to that time? Was that the
Concerning
beginning?
what?
Tropical. Yeah, like.
There's a fair bit of speculation
Yeah.
that people would have noticed precession of the equinoxes earlier, because if you watch the same stars, say the same equinoctial stars for long enough, and say you lived in a community that was kept records for 1,000 years or more, and sort of the same sort of ecliptical stars were important in terms of your measuring, then you would have noticed a shift. But whether you had the concept of the movement of precession as a whole is another matter. So that emerges with the classical Greeks. But then it's unclear as to when the Western zodiac actually became firmly rooted as being tropical.
Okay.
Because Claudius Ptolemy in the second century CE, he says that the first point of Aries coincides with the spring equinox.
Okay, he determined that.
But that's because that was during his lifetime. See? And so it's not at all clear as to whether he thought that was really where the first point of Aries begins, whether it's just his measurement at that time.
That was his New Year, in
yeah.
a sense. Spring equinox is New Year's for the seasonal cycle.
Yeah. Although winter solstice was also really important.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
It used to be assumed that then Ptolemy began the tropical zodiac at that point, and he certainly rationalised it, but it may not have been until after the Roman period that people had read the Tetrabiblos and the Almagest, where he set this out, and so started fixing Western astrology as being 0 Aries on the spring equinox.
Well, what I love about it is it reflects the cycle of maturation and development from the immature ego to the transpersonal divine self, and the yearly cycle as a model of that process, with each monthly cycle as a micro model of that process. And so this gets to the point of the dynamic integration and application of beyond the theory of the application of the theory. And in the article that you're writing, you mentioned that you had done a dance project relating to astrology, or theatrical.
Maybe I compress certain things into the same statement. That certainly was. You might be thinking of me talking about dance in relation to harmony.
Okay.
And Wendy's written a chapter for the book I'm editing, talking about basically pointing out that when you're doing a partner dance with somebody else, you have to be harmonious.
Yes.
And we both dance the Argentinian tango. And that requires a high level of harmony
Yes.
between two people, because in the tango you're not just working through the steps. You can work through the steps like a kind of choreography,
Yeah.
but really the dance is quite improvisational around a shared language.
Wow.
And the two, there's always conventionally a follower and a leader, and usually the follower is the man, and the leader is the man, the follower the woman.
Yeah.
But in fact, it's very much a conversation, because if you're the man conventionally, and you're leading conventionally, and the follower doesn't do what you think they're going to do, then your lead may not be working, or they may be sending back
It's
messages.
improvise. Redesign the plan.
So you redesign the plan.
Yes.
So, yeah.
How does this apply to global politics? I love that, because like rotating leadership, cooperative, improvisational redesigning of the plan.
Yeah. Well, I think the inspiration comes from martial arts, from Tai Chi, because when I started doing the tango, I thought, this is like Tai Chi.
Yeah.
And it is very much in that you stand with your legs slightly bent, and you move from here. You move a lot from your chest, like in Tai Chi. And as you move from here, your arms move. And so I mentioned this to various people, and they said, yeah, tango's like Tai Chi. So I think it's the martial arts, particularly Tai Chi, which is such a gentle martial art.
Yeah.
And so in terms of politics, you move with your partner. Maybe all representative political systems have a government and an opposition, and so maybe they need to be, imagining moving like Tai Chi. One partner always does try and trip the other up.
What I love about the ancient Taoists, like when the Chinese emperor, the Yellow Emperor, first started helping to put into text the Chinese medicine, they really started to see the human body as a microcosm of an empire.
Yeah.
And the heart was the emperor, empress, and the liver was the general, the stomach, the ministry of the grains, and so this whole kind of internalization of the body politic, you wouldn't have, your heart competing with your liver in a healthy situation. You wouldn't have a general trying to overthrow the emperor in a healthy situation. And so this is also the basis of what I believe could be a sustainable cooperative model for a global body, as we're starting to project. I mean, Henry Ford developed the first assembly line in the last century. Our cells did that 1 billion years ago.
Yeah.
3 billion. So we're slowly starting to externalize our microsystems. So I love the idea of the dance, of a global dance.
Yeah.
In harmony.
Yeah, the global dance. Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, we have to leave it there.
No, I think
I could have gone on for another hour easily.
Well, we'll do it again.
Yeah.
It's such a pleasure. I love talking with you.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Cool.
Fantastic.